HDFC, the familiar home loan provider, has passed into history. Yes, it lives on in HDFC Bank, into which it was merged, but the iconic company and stock that it was ceases to exist. The company started 46 years ago with a paid-up equity of just 10 crore rupees and touched at its height a market cap of 5 lakh crore rupees. That is what, a 5,000 times growth in 45 years? 45 years, during which it helped millions of Indians build their first homes and thousands of shareholders make many millions in wealth. Today I have with me two people who built this company literally brick by brick, or shall I say deposit by deposit or loan by loan. Keki Mistry, the last Vice Chairman and CEO of the company, and Renu Karnad, the last Managing Director of the company. Mrs. Karnad and Mr. Mistry, thank you very much for joining us. Really a pleasure that you should come by. Mrs. Karnad, I'm going to start with you. Sure. Because you were literally present at the creation 1978. Tell us how it felt. What was the first milestones you remember?
Oh, the first milestone for me really was the first loan that we disbursed.
Okay.
So though we were incorporated in October of 77, by the time we were ready to actually make a disbursement, get the applications in, it was September of 78. And that's when we disbursed our first loan. I started my life in HDFC in the legal department. Since I was in the legal department, I was the one who was supposed to do the disbursement and gave a loan to one gentleman called Mr. Remedius.
Oh.
And he built a small house. It was a self-construction house. I think we also have a picture of that house in our archive somewhere. And it was at that time one honestly didn't realize what were we stepping into and what were we going to create. I think it's only later as we started seeing the reaction of customers coming in and literally holding us in awe in terms of the way we did our business. And, if somebody asked us, in how many days will I get a loan? And we would say about 2 months. And they used to be so thankful.
Yeah.
In this digital age, they want the money in 2 hours. So 2 months, because everything else used to take 10 months and 8 months. It was wonderful.
Okay. Yeah, I heard that story from Narayan Murthy himself, that he couldn't believe that he and Sudha Murthy could actually get a loan in, just a few days. He thought maybe there's a catch somewhere and I'm missing it.
Yes.
Mr. Mistry, you joined when things were a little more stable. 1981, you tell me. But
Slightly
even then, yeah, but even then, I mean, I can't remember that far, but I would assume that a job in State Bank or in one of the foreign banks would have been far more attractive.
Latha, when I used to work with Indian hotels, and they wanted me to go to Goa as a chief accountant because they were setting up a new hotel in Goa. And my mother was all alone and she was staying with me, and I didn't want her to sort of stay back. So I decided that I would leave Indian hotels and join some other company. Okay. So at that time, there were a multitude of offers. There was an offer from Citibank, there was an offer from HDFC, and there were 2 other offers, which frankly I didn't consider. So the primary thing was either Citibank or HDFC. Then I thought Citibank is such a large multinational, it's such a huge organization. I'll be playing a very small part in that huge organization. HDFC was a young fledgling company. Our auditors were the same, Indian hotels, and HDFC's auditors were the same. So the partner in charge said, this is a great company. So I went for the interview. I was interviewed by the then general manager, Mr. Nagendra and Deepak Parekh. And I liked both of them. I liked the way of, I liked what they were thinking or what they were contemplating. So I just decided I'll join HDFC.
Okay. Well, so that's Citibank's lost twice over, huh? Even Aditya Puri left Citibank to come to HDFC's fold, and you as well.
But I never thought that I would work 40 years in one company, very honestly.
What led on? I mean, what kept the passion?
Yeah, I think 2-3 things happened. People, there were offers which came later on, one or two multinationals, one very large conglomerate wanted, which was the only time I was a little tempted, to be honest. But having said that, I think the work environment in HDFC was so nice, so conducive, free of politics. Anyone and everyone was free to go and meet whoever he or she wanted to meet. So there was a sense of pleasure, a sense of feeling good when you came to HDFC. And I always decided that if ever it comes to a situation where on a Friday evening I say, thank God, we got 2 days of holiday, and on Sunday evening I said, God, I have to go to work, that's the day you have to quit. That never happened.
Wow.
In 40 years, that never happened.
That sounds a little bit like CNBC-TV18, but no, this is the story of HDFC. Mrs. Karnad, okay, let me come to slightly more, lower down the journey. At what point did you feel that this is something big? I mean, you may not have felt that in 1978. Even then, there were big companies like Reliance and SBI and IOC and ONGC. But at some point, you all are the big league. When did you get that feeling?
I would say, it would have been somewhere in the early 80s when all of a sudden you realized that you were really a monopoly at that time. Okay. And the change that you could make in middle-class India, I would say it was middle-class India then, and what you were contributing, it was in some ways a very social product that you were bringing in. At the same time, you were also making sure that you continued to be a profitable company, doing this business in a manner in which, there was a win-win for all.
Absolutely.
And the part that, Latha, when we were a monopoly, actually, that time you realized that all of India was your game. You could, we could start lending anywhere, different stratas of society. Absolutely. Even today, when you look back, and I, also say today also, for the next 5-10 years, housing is going to continue and continue and continue. And here we were the only ones, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And we realized that, what is the strength of that product?
Okay.
And I think from there, we started growing. Of course, changing from just being a one-product company and becoming a conglomerate that we are today,
yes,
happened much later. That happened.
I'm coming to that story in a minute.
Yes,
but I wanted to ask you, since you joined the legal department, this is probably more your question. My father used to tell me this, and I thought even in my earlier years, I have sensed this. It wasn't safe to rent a house, for an owner to rent out his house because of the Rent Act, and the tenants wouldn't go away. So there were problems, and for you to repossess a house if someone defaulted, how did you manage through all these legal shocks, as it were?
So is that addressed to me, Latha?
Yes, Mrs. Karnad, to you.
So, Latha, very honestly, if most of our people, and even now maybe it's lesser, were people buying homes for living in it themselves. And that was the problem of renting out and not being able to get the property back really didn't exist, because you won't believe it. Somewhere in the 6th or 7th year, when somebody used to tell us that he's going to rent out the house, we used to say, okay, but then we will charge you 0.5% extra. You get a 0.5% extra to rent out. So it was actually occupation and ownership for the reason that they couldn't get, particularly in a place like Bombay, you can get a place to live. You couldn't get a place on rental, exactly for the reasons that you were talking about, the laws.
Okay.
The laws were so pro the tenants at that time that people were not building to rent. People were all buying
that actually
to
worked in your favor.
Buying to live. And that really worked in our favor. And one more little thing before you ask another question. We had no foreclosure laws.
Yes.
For the first 15 years. That is where I want to tell you what Mr. H.D. Parekh, who actually, he was the one who thought of it, and there's enough written about that. But his faith in the Indian middle class, if you gave them something like a house that, despite not having all the legal, plethora of legal rules that you could go and use, the Indian middle class was trustworthy, and the Indian middle class would pay. We actually built our whole business on that one sentence.
Okay. So that's good to hear. My first HDFC loan was 1992. Just tough to be married to take a loan. So yeah, you can say, at that time you want a roof over your house, and you're very honest about that. But that brings me to the finance part, Mr. Mistry. First, did you not find the competition from banks? Because banks have savings products. Their money is so cheap.
See, you kept talking about over the years competition from banks, and I kept telling you all the time that the growth opportunities are so huge, so enormous in India, that all banks can come and do housing loans, but still there'll be enough growth available for everyone. Now, you talked about banks having access to low-cost savings, current account, all of that. The fact of the matter is we operate with a very low-cost structure. Absolutely. Our cost-income ratio was single-digit. Way back in early 2000s, I would say late 90s, when we used to meet investors, we said we have 4 clear goals that we have in mind. And one of those goals was to increase our return on equity every year by 100 basis points, which we managed to do. You know, for nearly 15 years, if you go back, our return on equity was at least 1 percentage point higher than what it was in the previous year.
before. Wow.
So this is despite competition. Competition from banks, to my mind, started in 97. And then really started peaking up, I would say, from early 2000s. But there is so much scope to grow. The last 2 years, if you look at the growth of housing loans for HDFC and for the banking system, we have grown at a rate which is faster than the growth in the banking system.
No, but I'm not done with the finance question.
Yeah, sure, please.
I have to take a break, but I've got a more challenging
Sure,
finance
sure,
question
of course.
after this break.
Sure.